And we are back here on the Analyticaliowan podcast. It is Sunday, December 21st, as you are listening to this. And of course, as I say almost every day, we got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, let's get into it. So, we had the release of the Epstein files 2 days ago, and there's been a lot of pushback against this administration. Um, they didn't release hardly anything. Now, the MAGAs are already coming out and they're celebrating. They're coming out saying things like, see, told you he wasn't in the files. There's nothing there. It's perfectly above board. Why was this such a thing? Well, they're missing a lot of context because A, they don't dig deep into anything, and B, they listen to places like Fox News that don't tell them the whole story. What they released was less than 1% of everything that was in the Epstein files, period. They're playing games with what to be released. Todd Blanche comes out and says, well, we're going to release some now, some in a little bit, some down the road. It's going to take time. We got to make sure everything's redacted properly, etc. But that's not what the law said. The law that was signed said 30 days, and 30 days was up 2 days ago. Everything was supposed to be released. And supposedly they had been working on the Epstein files to get them ready to be released. Donald Trump promised they'd be released to the public as a campaign promise. And they've supposedly been digging through those the whole time. You know, Pam Bondi came out a while back, right after they got elected, right after Trump got into office, and had said, well, yeah, the Epstein files are on my desk. Then came out and said, well, I've looked through all of it, and there's nothing there. Well, I guarantee you she didn't look through all of it because there's thousands and thousands, millions of pages of evidence and documentation and hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of pictures and images and video and all sorts of things. They cherry picked what they wanted to release, and now they are trying to tell us that that is, everything, that is in full compliance with the law. It's not. Donald Trump didn't want the files released. That's the other half of the narrative. Donald Trump always comes out and says, yeah, we're going to release the files. But then if you watch his actions, and this is the part that the Trumplefucks, the MAGAs don't see. If you watch Donald Trump, he told anybody in Congress who voted to release the files. He said it for months that they would be deemed hostile to this administration, that they would be primaried, that he would bring the weight of the party down on them, basically, for doing that. And when that didn't work, and once then he called up Mike Johnson during the government shutdown and said, find a reason, put pressure on the Democrats to keep to open the government, but keep the House out of session because they'll have the votes to open the Epstein file vote. We don't want to do that. Keep them out for as long as you can. They went 6 weeks without having the House in session. This House of Representatives, this Congress, has been one of the least productive we've ever had, in part because they haven't been there. They took an unscheduled 6-week break, and then when it came time for the day of the files to be released, Mike Johnson again sends them home early. In part, I think they did it because they didn't want to be around for the backlash that would come out from the fucking around that this administration has done with the Epstein files. And with what we did get, the less than 1%, it is pages upon pages upon pages of stuff that is fully redacted, where it is just basically the entire page, if you were to print it out, would be nothing but black ink. No spaces, nothing. This is a slap in the face to the American people. This is a slap in the face to Congress. Now, what is going to happen because of it? Well, the DOJ would be the ones to investigate this, but they're the ones causing it. So probably nothing going to happen on their part of it. What's going to happen is something like what is being discussed. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, Massie being a Republican, Ro Khanna being a Democrat, are working on and discussing articles of impeachment for Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, we've talked a lot about the impeachment process. It's a high bar. Now, to get it through the House, you just need a majority. That would only take about 5 Republicans. But to get an impeachment and successfully remove somebody from their position, anybody that is in an impeachable position, say a cabinet secretary, a Supreme Court justice, a district court judge, or the president of the United States, among others, you would need to have 67 votes in the U.S. Senate. Republicans currently hold 53. So 24 Republicans, just under half of what the Republicans have in the Senate, would have to break ranks and side with all Democrats to remove whoever gets brought up on impeachment charges. Okay? Now, the impeachment itself, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, impeachment is the official charge. Basically, what happens is the House of Representatives votes on an article of impeachment, which is an official charge from the House of Representatives. Now, there is no criminal penalty. These cannot be pardoned. What they are is charges that would that go to the Senate for trial. And the 100 senators are the jury. And when 2/3 vote to convict, then that person is just removed from their position and they can be barred from ever holding office again. Those are the only two penalties for impeachment. There is no civil fines, there are no monetary fine of any kind, there is no criminal penalty, they cannot be thrown in jail. It is just removal from office. And we have never impeached or we've never removed anybody through impeachment. We have come close. Uh, Andrew Jackson, I think. I think it was Andrew Jackson, or was it Andrew Johnson? One of the two was one vote away from being removed. Not very well liked. I think it was Andrew Johnson right after the Civil War. But he wasn't very well liked and he was a dick. But that's the closest we've come. Bill Clinton didn't get removed. Donald Trump was impeached twice. And if there had been more time left in Donald Trump's first term, I think they would have probably removed him. But Mitch McConnell took the coward's way out and said, well, technically his term's over. He's going to be out of office. We don't need to remove him now. We can do it later. So that's what they did. They removed him, or they said, we were not going to remove him. We're going to let it be a criminal justice problem, and the Department of Justice can deal with it under the Biden administration. We've never removed anybody from impeachment, but I'm going to make a prediction. And it's the same thing I have been saying about this situation all along. And this goes for anybody that the House could currently choose to remove or to impeach. If they are put in by a Republican while the Republicans have control of the House and the Senate, I don't expect the impeachment vote to go through. I don't expect it to be passed unless they already know behind closed doors that they have discussed it with the senators and they have the votes. Now, there's nothing illegal about having those conversations. Now, I guarantee you, if something comes out that they were doing that, Donald Trump would want to come out and say, well, that's illegal. They can't do that. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. Well, maybe if we were talking about a criminal case where life in prison was on the line or the death penalty or something like that. That's when the jury's not allowed to discuss the case outside of the deliberation room and not before the end of the trial. But that's not this. The only penalty for successfully being found guilty during an impeachment is removal from office and barring from ever holding again. The stakes are low. And the Congress has done it before. Remember under Nixon with Watergate. They went to Nixon and said, hey, we got the votes to remove you. You'd better resign. And he stopped, he thought about it, and he ends up resigning. Gave us President Ford. Now, is Donald Trump going to resign over any of this? Not yet. But they're talking about impeaching Pam Bondi. Now, Pam Bondi may not be the only one that falls because of this. You have Todd Blanche, who is also coming out and giving all sorts of uh, fucked up answers, saying, well, we've released everything we've had to. No, you didn't. You've released less than 1%. He's also said that it's going to take time and it's going to be coming out in the coming weeks and months. And basically, he has told the world that they're going to take their time agreeing with what Congress passed, that they're just going to drag this out and it's going to be no big deal. Now, this is kind of how we expected them to fuck around with it. Thought they might announce some new investigations or something like that. But remember, this isn't the only set of documents for the Epstein files. Congress has been going through and they're doing their own bipartisan investigation in the House Oversight Committee. And they're releasing more photos. And some of these photos are kind of fucked up. Now, there were some photos that were released that showed underage girls, all so far appearing to be, from the bits I've seen, either not showing whether or not they were fully clothed, or sensitive areas at least covered, I think. But they had quotes from the book Lolita written on at least one of the girls, which is creepy in and of itself. And if you are not familiar with that book, I don't remember who the author is, but basically, it's written from the main character's perspective, where he talks about having feelings for and wanting a relationship with, and I believe actually having a relationship with his 12-year-old daughter, stepdaughter, something like that. It's very weird, and that puts in worse context for the Epstein files. Those were things released by the House Oversight Committee. That is some of what they have, and they haven't released all of the worst information they have. Now, uh, going with it, uh, the DOJ, when they did release everything, I guess some stuff has already disappeared. There were some things that were put up that have now been taken back down. They weren't redacted enough, apparently, for the DOJ's liking. But now that they've been out there, it's hard for them to, uh, fix it and put it back. Apparently, I've been hearing other people claim that the search function doesn't work. Some people are saying it works just fine, but with all of the redactions, it's hard to tell. And of course, the MAGA followers are going, well, you type Trump's name into the search bar and nothing comes up, except it does, because he's in there mentioned a few times. Now, there is one police statement from one of the victims referred to as Jane Doe. She talks about being taken by Epstein, having a very weird vibe with Epstein, and it was early in her recruitment. I think she was 14, I believe, and got taken to Mar-a-Lago well before Donald Trump was president. Oh wow, that was a Freudian slip. That he was she took or Epstein took her to Mar-a-Lago to meet Donald Trump, and that Epstein nudged Donald Trump and said, "Yeah, yeah, isn't she a good one?" or something like that. And he nodded and smiled, in agreement. And she was too young and naive to understand what they were talking about. And that went on. Now, the more of the stuff that comes out with these Epstein files, the worse it is going to be for Donald Trump. The pressure's already on. And Pam Bondi and others have to realize that they are protecting Donald Trump for right now. But at some point, he is going to be gone. Whether the Big Mac gets him, whether uh, whether anything that he's got happens, whether the Republicans just say, you know what, we got to move on. I've been talking about that a lot, about how they're worried about getting reelected, and that they may decide that their best path toward reelection is to walk away and remove themselves from Donald Trump's presence. That's also possible. So, that being said, they have to realize this. So them doing this is only going to hurt themselves. And Donald Trump can't save them, right? Like I said, you can't pardon for an impeachment. And How would you like to be the first person in U.S. history to be successfully removed from your position through impeachment when your party holds complete power? Now, the last time the Democrats were in this situation where they held complete power was like the 60s under LBJ. And by complete power, we are talking about the House, the Senate, the presidency, and a majority of justices on the court that were appointed by Democrats. And the 60s brought us all of the civil rights stuff, all of the civil rights acts, all of that came out of the 60s. And that is when we had a liberal appointed Supreme Court with a liberal Congress. And that was the last time that happened. So we have to watch these Epstein files and see what happens going forward. It's not going to be great for Donald Trump and anybody else involved. And I think this is going to be one of the things that causes the cracks to come out in the Republican Party. Now, there are other problems in the Republican Party in the House, one of them being they've got such a narrow majority that they lose more than a few people, and Democrats could potentially take over mid-session. Now, that's a far cry. That's something that is very, very weakly as a potential that could happen. But right now, Republicans have 220 seats. But here in about 2 weeks, when Marjorie Taylor Greene resigns, they're going to be down to 219. If the Democrats somehow pick up that seat, adding in the other two seats that are still up for grabs, which elections are coming early next year, those are both in safe Democratic districts, that would bring the number to 216 Democrat to 219 Republican. It would only take two more resignation and pickups on the Democratic side, or two Republicans to say enough of this bullshit. We're going to get wiped out in the midterms. The only way I even stand a chance at getting reelected is to maybe switch parties and hope that the Democrats in my district will vote for me. Because I did enough and I walked away from Donald Trump and I walked away from the madness. Problem is, I think it's all a little bit too late at this point. The damage has been done. The stench of Donald Trump and everything going on with this administration will be all over those that were complicit. And it is going to be very, very hard for them to rebrand and reconfigure everything to save themselves in the election. Now, with everything going on, we got tons of stuff to talk about, of course. Now, one of the things Donald Trump came out and announced was these warrior dividend checks, and more is coming out about this. Now, apparently, the reason they were able to get it all done so fast is that they took this housing allotment that had already been approved because housing is going up, and it had already been approved for certain service members. And basically, what they did was instead of giving them, I believe, from what I am reading, it was supposed to be a $2,000 allotment. So instead of $2,000, they turn around and they're giving everybody $1,776. So right off the bat, you're getting $214 less than what you were originally promised from the government. Now, some people didn't either know that this was promised or whatever, but the way Donald Trump made the announcement, because he's claiming it is coming from his tariffs, and it's not. Okay, this is money that had been appropriated from Congress to pay for housing for service members. And Donald Trump turns around, rebrands it, calls it his Patriot check, his Patriot dividend, warrior dividend, whatever you want to call it, and says, well, we're going to give it to all of the service members. Now, if I'm a service member and I know there's a housing allotment coming of $2,000, and now he says, well, you're also I'm giving you this dividend check of $1,776. Well, I'm expecting $3,776 total when you add it together. So what happens when that other 2,000 then doesn't show up? Well, you're scrambling. You're freaking out. You're wondering what can I do? How can I make this work? How can I do anything? Right? This is typical Donald Trump. This is trademark Donald Trump. Rebrand something somebody else has done. He's taking credit for it, and he gets the win. Just like Joe Biden passed a cap on prescription drug prices. Donald Trump got rid of it and then comes out and says, well, we're doing this to try to lower drug prices, and uh, makes it worse, right? Donald Trump always takes something somebody else has done and then tries to get the credit for it. Look at his peace deal with um, Palestine and Israel, the one that really hasn't held up. Now, tensions and stuff have de-escalated somewhat over there, but it's not fully resolved. And maybe that's only because we've got so much stuff going on here that I'm not seeing as much from there. But as far as I know, it's not settled. It's not over. They took the plan that was basically written in its entirety by the Biden administration that was left as a game plan. And they said, hey, if you need it, use it. And then they couldn't come up with anything. They couldn't get it to go together. And then they brought out this plan, this one that the Biden administration came up with and used it as their plan. That is trademark Donald Trump. That is what he does all the time. He is big about rebranding and changing things and not always making it better. Now, speaking about rebranding things, we've been talking about Donald Trump wanting to rename the Kennedy Center in his own image, right? He wants to call it the Donald J. Trump Kennedy Center. Now, more and more is coming out about this rename. Apparently, he had fired pretty much the entire board of the Kennedy Center, brought in loyalists and sycophants, put them all on the board, and then they held this vote, months later. I think he fired them all in March. And then he turned around and now they hold this vote. And we are hearing that people who wanted to object didn't get their chance to speak. Some of them weren't allowed to actually cast a vote. Their mics were turned off. So it appeared to be unanimous, and it really wasn't. Now, Donald Trump needs it to look unanimous so he can come out and spin the win and say, well, see, they say it's okay. We need to rename this. Except it's not that simple. The Kennedy Center is a historical building. It is protected under certain laws. And one of those laws requires an act of Congress to change its name. Period. Did Congress pass anything that would change the name of the Kennedy Center? No, they did not. So there should be no renaming of the Kennedy Center. The other part of that of the U.S. law, and I don't know if it's the same law or a separate law, typically says things like buildings, parks, and things like that can't be named after living people without an act of Congress. Well, Donald Trump's still alive, at least as far as I know. We haven't gotten word of the big, beautiful obituary yet. As Mark Twain once said, I wouldn't wish death upon anybody, but there are lots of obituaries I can't wait to read. And that is what's going to happen with Donald Trump when he is finally gone, when he shuffles off this mortal coil. So there should be no name change for the Kennedy Center. However, Donald Trump, wasting no time, probably sent somebody out to Home Depot, found the cheapest, tackiest gold lettering he could find, and they've already put his name on the building. Now, if he wants to have his name on the building, as much as I don't care, I don't exactly care if he does it right now, right? Why? Because this isn't permanent. This isn't official, right? It's like him renaming the War Department or the Department of Defense to the War Department, things like that. These are things that are going to be changed back as soon as he is gone when there is a Democrat back in office. Now, I don't know if J.D. Vance would uh, be willing to keep that name there and if he would sign anything passed by Congress. Problem is, if they're going to pass something through Congress, uh, they would need bipartisan support because you'd have to get past the filibuster. And well, that ain't going to happen. So this is performative, right? And we're already seeing the counter effects of what happens with Donald Trump having his hand in the Kennedy Center. Everything Donald Trump touches fails, it dies. And I don't want to see the Kennedy Center fail. However, acts are not going there. They're not selling out events like they used to. Um, Certain performers are now that Donald Trump has put his name on the building, they're canceling their venue, right? That they were canceling that they were going to go there and they're booking someplace else. They are He's effectively making it so nobody books there. Who are they going to get at the Kennedy Center next? They're going to get Kid Rock, somebody like that to go perform. I mean, we're hearing that they're not selling out events like they used to and that they're having to give tickets away just to make sure it looks at least full enough that uh, you know they keep up the appearance. Donald Trump is a horrible businessman. He doesn't understand the concepts of business, and we see this all the time. Now, uh, on one of the morning shows this morning before I recorded this, I heard uh, Hakeem Jeffries was talking about healthcare. And he thinks that they are going to be able to pass their 3 year plan, that they have the votes in the House. And he thinks that's going to put the pressure on the Senate. Now, he might be right, but it's also going to depend on how many votes actually vote on uh, passing it. If it squeaks through at 218 votes, maybe not. If they get it through, and if they start getting it closer to a veto proof majority, somewhere around 290, um, then yeah, the Senate may take it up and they may have a plan. I still don't know if this is going to be the one that gets through. I've been saying I think it's going to be a 2 year plan. And the reason I say 2 versus 3 years, let's look at it logically. Letting the ACA subsidies expire this year, like they are going to, is going to be politically horrible for Republicans. Okay. They are going to have to explain this away all year. They are going to spend the year explaining why did the subsidies expire? Okay. What happened? Why didn't you pass it? Even if they turn around, they pass it down the road and they make people whole, they are going to have to answer those questions and they're not going to want to have to do that. Okay. They're going to have to figure that out. And I know they're not going to want to have to answer those questions. Then you have the fact that um, if you go 3 years, or even if they only pass a single year extension, they're going to have to answer those questions at about the end of the year. Okay. Either way is going to be bad for Republicans. If you go 4 years, now you're past the end of the Trump administration. And now you're looking at the next president being in power. And that gives that person something to run on in the general in 2028. Saying, well, yeah, I'm going to keep extending the ACA subsidies. We're going to get healthcare fixed and everything like that. It gives them a talking point. And Republicans aren't going to want to give Democrats another talking point. They already have a lot they can work with. And this administration knows they're in trouble. They know that the Republicans are going to be in trouble in 28. They're already worried about losing the House in 26. Okay, they are worried about losing the House and possibly the Senate. So 1 and 2 years or expiring, or 1 and 3 years are bad, right? Now, if you go 3 years, now you're dealing with them being up in 28. Okay. In 28, same problem as I'm running out in 29. You're talking about it's time for the general election. And again, they're answering questions about it all election cycle. And it's going to be horrible for them to be able to run on that. That's why I thought 2 years was going to be the best plan. Now, what happens when this gets to Donald Trump's desk? And is he going to sign it? I think you could get him to sign it. Now, hopefully, they put something in this plan that would retroactively make people whole, right? That if insurance companies had to charge higher premiums because they didn't get this passed until say January 15th, um, that they have some kind of retroactive payment, maybe even another open enrollment window for people to be able to log in and access it if they had chose not to get coverage because of the expiring premium, something like that. But how do you get Donald Trump to sign it? Okay. Well, you tell him, we still want to pass your plan. Now, his plan is instead of giving the money to the insurance companies, it is giving the money to the people and saying, well, here, go buy your own health care. Donald Trump has never had to pay for health care in his life. Prior to becoming president, prior to entering politics, I guarantee you, Donald Trump never uh, had to deal with health care at all. He would go to the doctor if he needed to for whatever illness he had, or when his kids were younger. And I know he didn't maybe personally go, but he would send any one of his three wives or whoever took them to the doctor. Um, and the answer would be the same: just pay the bill. And they wouldn't have insurance; they'd pay cash. Well, he thinks everybody can just do that kind of thing, and he says, well, if we give you $1,500, that'll cover your healthcare costs for the year. Most people's deductible is more than that. Like mine is 4, 7, I don't remember, somewhere in there. I never hit it anyway because I rarely go to the doctor. I'm the type of person that insurance companies love. I don't go to the doctor unless I absolutely need to because most of the time you don't get a good answer. Um, and you know, you end up, at least for me, feeling like I wasted my time. Um, I went numerous times to the walk-in clinic down here trying to get an answer because it wasn't overly pressing, but I had time and I'm like, well, yeah, I should go figure out what's going on with this or with that. So I go to the walk-in clinic and the answer I would get is, well, keep doing what you're doing, but follow up with your primary care doctor. And like in the one case, I had a stress fracture in my foot, nothing too serious, but it was painful. Followed up with my primary care doctor after the walk-in. They turned around, sent me to the podiatrist. Podiatrist goes, yeah, it's just a stress fracture here. Take some anti-inflammatory stuff and you'll be fine. Now, if I would have tried that on my own, I probably would have been okay. Um, but anyway, my point is, I'm one of those people that don't go to the doctor hardly ever, and I go ahead and I make the insurance companies lots of money. But um, what giving me like that money and not cutting off my deductible, that might work for somebody in my case where I hardly go to the doctor. But for a lot of people, you go to the doctor and you need to be able to be seen. Now, if you're paying, I saw one TikTok from a family, and I realized some of this is anecdotal evidence. But they were going to go from $500 to $2,000 a month, I believe it was, on their health insurance. It was already 500, and I could believe it because um, I remember 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, I was looking at my insurance policies, and I couldn't believe the striking difference between single and uh, you know spouse and kids plans, and that was like the single coverage at that particular job was something like $25, $30 every 2 weeks, every paycheck, and the family plan then already for the same coverage per person, but just because you were covering more people was like 225, 250. So I could believe 500 a month easily. is now going to go up to 2,000. Well, who can afford $2,000 a month just for health coverage? Now you're talking, 2,000 a month times 12 months, that's $24,000 a year just for your health insurance. And that's before you get into deductibles and anything like that. Well, 24,000 for some people is getting close to what they are making for the year, right? I mean, I know it's somewhere around, I think 17 or $18 an hour is about what puts you at about 30 grand for the year, somewhere in that ballpark. And if you're making under that, you're making less than 30 grand. It would be the entirety of your money. So then you gamble with it. And one of the things you used to be able to do if you were making that little is you'd be able to get on Medicaid. But Donald Trump and this administration, specifically in the One Big Beautiful Bill, they gutted Medicaid. They made it harder to get on Medicaid. They made it harder to qualify, and they reduced how much money is in the program so even less people can qualify. And they did it all in the name of waste, fraud, and abuse. Um, so Hakeem Jeffries thinks his plan, his 3-year plan for extending the subsidies, is going to work. Okay. And I hope he's right. I hope it does pass. Um, but if it doesn't, I firmly believe that this is going to be what causes the uh, the House to flip to the Democrats by 50 plus seats, and it probably guarantees them the Senate. Because now, even if they pass something, if the Republicans don't do it by the end of the year and they have to wait till next year, and even if they ultimately make it right for people, it is going to be a good talking point that the Democrats can use to show exactly how bad the Republicans are at governing, at doing all of those things. But they were willing to let you go without health care. They were willing to let you suffer. Um, Now, Donald Trump wants us to believe the economy is going very, very well, and it's not. Okay, he did a rally Friday night where he was talking about how great the economy was and all of this, and it was his normal talking points. And I think it was at this rally. Now, I could be getting my stories crisscrossed, so I may be getting the source of the quote wrong. But Donald Trump comes out and says that he could eliminate all unemployment in the nation, all 4.6% of the unemployment rate, if he just hired unnecessary federal workers. Now, a couple things with this. He continued to say that that's what we had before under Joe Biden, and that he would make that he's already fixed the unnecessary worker problem in the federal government, and he's not going to bring in a bunch of unnecessary workers uh, just to fix the unemployment problem. Well, this is where again Donald Trump fucks up. He doesn't realize what he is saying. First of all, if it was true, which it's not, that the entirety of the 4.6% unemployment rate was all due to layoffs with the federal government, does he not realize that that is his doing? That the blame could be laid at his feet for all of it then? And he just admitted in what he just said that he's the one responsible for the uh, the unemployment? Doesn't he realize it? Or is he just that dumb? Well, that's part of it. Okay. He doesn't realize that by saying that because he thought he was successfully shifting the blame to Joe Biden by saying, well, we had all these unnecessary workers in the federal government, so I'd have no unemployment if I left him alone. Well, again, he doesn't realize that he's blaming himself for it. Two, we didn't have unnecessary workers in the federal government, and he knows it. Why? Because how many people have been brought back? after the fact? How many have they come through with and said after the fact, oh, yeah, I guess we did need you. You got to get back to work? Quite a few. Quite a few. Uh, Donald Trump, they fired a bunch of people that maintained the nuclear weapons. Almost immediately had to rehire them. Other groups, they were going to let them all go. They were going to let go a bunch of IRS workers, tax people. Turned around, tax season came in. They said, "Oh fuck, we got to have these people." Brought them back. Um, and now I did a story I talked about several weeks ago, I think now, where it was people from the Department of Education talking about discrimination complaints with education, talking about things like ADA compliance and things like that, where um, they needed to get through a backlog of complaints for schools, and they couldn't do it with the staffing they currently had. So they offered everybody that was let go a chance to come back, help them get through the backlog with pay, of course. But then once they were through the backlog, they were going to get fired again. Now, I don't think anybody took them up on that offer, but that's the point of what this administration is trying to do. They don't even realize what they are saying, what they are doing. Um, he is saying, well, we had all these unnecessary people, but yet you constantly bring them back. And then they were letting like air traffic controllers go, things like that. They brought them back with bonus pay, and they were even loosening the restrictions on some of the people who had aged out because they couldn't find anybody to fill those roles. Again, bonuses and etc. The other half of it is if he is saying that all of that unemployment, you know, was in the that he could end this, he just doesn't realize the logistical nightmare of hiring that many people. There's always going to be some unemployment nationwide. You can't get that number down to zero. You just can't. Um, because for one reason or another, there are going to be people that are unemployed. Maybe not unemployable, but that they will be between jobs for one reason or another. It's never going to be perfect. And you would think Donald Trump, being a businessman, would understand that. And I think on some levels he does, but he doesn't care about the reality, right? He only wants to defend his position and blame somebody else. Donald Trump's entire shtick at this point, and I don't know how the Republicans aren't sick of this, it's deny everything, blame somebody else, but take credit for everything. Basically, his policy is if it's going great, I'm responsible. If it's going bad, I knew nothing about it. Or I knew nothing about it, but it's that person's fault. That's the way he operates on everything. It's not hard to see. It's pretty obvious what he's doing. Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. He's not some master strategist. He's just trying to hold on. And he's trying to hold on to his health. He is trying to hold on to power. And I don't think it's going to be a matter of if, but it's going to be when he is out of office before the end of this term. I firmly do not believe he makes it to January 20th of 2029. Period. I think his health gives out before then. Now, I had seen some things on TikTok, and I have not verified this yet. But before I sat down to record, that they were saying that Donald Trump hasn't really been seen in public much since the files were released and they started getting the backlash. And that could be true. He could be getting another treatment of whatever they're doing to him. Um, the last time he did that public event, that rally Friday night in North Carolina. That was a very low energy rally for him. He wasn't nearly as energetic as he had been. It was also a pretty poor turnout. Now he's out trying to rally and campaign for everybody else because he himself can't run. Now he floats this idea of Trump 2028, but I think he is saying that more for his own peace of mind because he doesn't want to deal with his impending mortality. Donald Trump is not in good shape. He comes out and he does this event, this address to the nation Wednesday night, and he's basically screaming at us for 18 minutes. He looked like he had more energy, but you can just kind of see in some of his mannerisms. He's terrified. He was terrified of what was going to happen with the Epstein files. He's terrified of losing power. And it could be that he's even terrified of his own mortality. But then the very next day, he was at an event in the Oval Office. He's signing something. And he turns around and he started to doze off at that event. Apparently, he spent all of his energy on that address to the nation the night before, or whatever they gave him, they couldn't give him more of to prop him up because of dosing limitations, etc. I think the stress of all of it, the stress of being president with everything failing around him, is going to get to Donald Trump. It just will. Period. He is going to end up gone. Whether that's a heart attack, whether that's a stroke, whether he resigns for his own peace of mind because he can't get away from all of it, whether the Republicans decide enough is enough and they get rid of him. I think something is going to happen to Donald Trump, and he will not make January 20th, 2029, which is the end of his term. There's no way he gets reelected. If he somehow does make it all the way to January 20th, 2029, well, I'll say, like I say with a lot of things, I was wrong. Um, but he will end up being a shell of his former self, and he will not want to run for president. The only reason he even wanted to be president now was it was his get out of jail free card for all of the things and all of the investigations that came out. Remember, it was right around the election for the midterms in 2022 when Merrick Garland comes out and announces that he appointed Jack Smith to start looking into the election. And then Donald Trump comes out and goes, "Yep, I'm running. I'm running for president. You can't go after me. I'm a presidential candidate," even though that has never been a thing. Donald Trump only ran to avoid prison. And he also ran to avoid releasing the Epstein files. I've talked about it before. But the real thing is, if he wanted to avoid releasing the Epstein files, what he should have done would have been the smart thing and just not ran. Kamala Harris wasn't talking about releasing the Epstein files. They weren't doing anything with the Epstein files at all. They just were going to apparently let it all go and do nothing. Then Donald Trump runs on releasing them because he knew he could rile up a good section of the country about it, and then he thought he could come out and say, "Well, there's nothing to see here." He tried that and it failed. Again, with everything Donald Trump related, he fails. So uh, I just don't think his health is going to hold out all the way until 2029. He's just not. He's not looking good. We've seen him struggle to go downstairs. We've seen images of his face drooping in public, which are signs of stroke. We've seen video of him appearing to not exactly know where he was. Like I talked about it just the other day again, but remember back when he had that Asia trip and he was in Japan. He was supposed to walk with the Prime Minister of Japan up to the American and Japanese flags, stop, turn, respectfully bow, turn, and continue walking. But he wasn't walking in step with her. He was just kind of shuffling along at his own pace, which was slightly faster than what he should have been walking. Kind of gets the American flag, gives it kind of a weak salute, doesn't even really look toward the flag, but like he realized that, oh, it's the flag, I better do this, and just kind of kept going. And even the Prime Minister of Japan had to stop and look and like, what is wrong with you? What do what are you doing? And then spent part of the event kind of leading him around and making sure he went to the right places. Donald Trump's health is not good to the point that when he uh, finally goes, the only people that are going to be surprised that he is gone are going to be the MAGAs, the Trumplafucks, because they are the ones that are um, beholden to Donald Trump. They believe everything he is doing, they believe in everything he is saying, and at least some of them, they treat him like some kind of the second coming of Jesus. And it wouldn't surprise me if they keep a vigil by his gravesite for a while after he is dead and gone and buried, if he even has a gravesite. Some people have suggested he may end up having to get buried at sea because otherwise, the amount of people who would defile that gravesite by doing things and relieving themselves, if you know what I mean, on his gravesite, um, would just be too great. There'd probably be a line starting there and wrapping to the other coast, wherever he ends up being. Um, and I'm not, that's just the way it's going to be. So they may have to bury him at sea. They may have to cremate him and put him in an urn, and one of the kids may have to end up holding on to him until it is safe to go bury him in secret or something like that. Um, which if that's what they end up doing and they bury him in a grave with no marker, that would be one of the biggest insults to Donald Trump you could ever get. It wouldn't surprise me if his final plans involve some kind of an elaborate monument to himself, because in all reality, that's what everything he is doing right now is all about. He is scared and terrified of his own mortality. That's why he wants to build this grandiose, huge 90,000 square foot unnecessary ballroom that is going to dwarf the size of the original White House. It is going to be gaudy and ridiculous if they even get it done. Um, just so he can slap his name on it and call it, the Trump Memorial, whatever. Same with by putting in the Arc de Triomphe that he wants to put in across from the Lincoln Memorial. He wants to build it so it is a memorial to him. It is something to honor him after he is gone. Same with putting his name on the Kennedy Center. Uh, it is all about remembering Donald Trump, and it wouldn't surprise me if his final plans are big gaudy monuments, but I don't think they're going to be able to actually go through with it because, like I said, so many people are going to end up defiling that gravesite. Now, when Donald Trump is ultimately gone, whether he makes it to 2029 or not, uh, the next up should be JD Vance, but they're all jockeying for control of the MAGA movement. That's the problem. They don't have a clear front runner. JD Vance, as the sitting vice president, you would think he would be the front runner. Problem is, they don't like that son of a bitch. He's not liked in Congress. The voting base don't like him, and he's just somebody that was picked. Um, Now, we've been hearing that apparently the plan with Turning Point was to run JD Vance and Charlie Kirk. But then, of course, what happened to Charlie? Now, that would have been a combo that could have actually had some uh, hold with the MAGA base because Charlie Kirk was that up and coming rising star. And they don't really have that right now. MAGA is fractured into multiple groups. And I don't think any of those groups are going to be able to capture the full imagination of the MAGA movement. They're not going to see the same vision that Donald Trump tried to peddle. And the MAGA base is not going to vote for him the same way like they would if it was Donald Trump. So what happens? Where do they go from here? Well, ultimately, they're going to have to try JD Vance, especially if Donald Trump doesn't make it. As long as JD Vance wants to run for a second term, I think they are going to talk him into it. Assuming Donald Trump does not make it to 2029, I think JD Vance ends up running, and he is going to be easiest, probably, maybe, other than a Trump kid, for the Democrats to beat. But I don't see anybody stepping into the race that is going to be a decent challenge to Democrats. There are no good Republicans right now. They've pretty much uh, destroyed their credibility. So they have to turn around and do what they can to make things better. They have to push this guy. and hope that it's just enough to push them over that finish line, and it's not going to work. So I think J.D. Vance gets smoked in 28, and then they try to reimagine and come back up to be the Republicans of old, um, and go back to being more Bush era Republicans. And I don't know if that's going to work. I think the damage has been done. They may end up needing to scrap the Republican name altogether and going with some kind of a new party, or waiting even longer than just 4 years. It could take a generation for the Republicans to be relevant again. We'll just have to see how that plays out. But that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast. I hope you have a great day. I will be back tomorrow because there's always stuff to talk